Welcome back to the Student Hub Live orientation event for the School of Education, Childhood, Youth and Sport. This next section is about making a difference, and we're going to talk about some of the amazing work that some of the team at the Open University are involved with internationally. Now, it's estimated that half of the school-aged children in the world will not be able to read or write by the time they complete primary education. So to discuss this issue, I'm joined by Chris and Tom and Claire, and we have some widgets at home that we'd like you to vote on as well. So in the interactive section on your screen, you'll see some questions. They're multi-choice questions, so you just need to read the question and then click on the answer that applies to you. How many more teachers are needed across the globe to give every child access to primary and secondary education by 2030? Then there's another question. Is the number of children able to read or write across the world going up or down or staying the same? And what number of official languages are there in schools in Zambia? So let's start. Tom, why is the OU involved in some of this amazing international development work? What's in it for us?
Well, the Open University's mission is to be open to people, places, methods and ideas, and through that to bring high quality university education to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to that. So what we're doing with the international development work really is taking that mission and extending it to new contexts and working with some of the most needy and disadvantaged people around the world.
And we're doing that in a number of different ways. I mean, both through technology and also you mentioned a number of different places around the world. What's the scale of this?
Well, the scale of the challenge, and then we'll come and talk about some of our projects that we're responding to that with, but the scale of the challenge is vast. So, as you said in your introduction, it's estimated roughly half of the children in the world leave primary school without being able to read or write or use a basic number. And if you look at low resource contexts, low income countries, that rises to around 90% of all of the children. And we know there's extensive evidence that teachers are the most significant aspect of that quality component of a child's education. And there's recent research that's come out of the RISE programme that suggests that if you're a child in Sub-Saharan Africa, then if you took as the basic necessities for saying you'd got a quality education, so you have a teacher in front of you who is attempting to teach, that teacher themselves would pass the student level assessment, and that teacher would have some reasonably sound ideas about how they might teach that student curriculum. Then the evidence suggests that it's around 1 in 200 children would have those criteria fulfilled. So your chances, if you were a child in Sub-Saharan Africa, of having a teacher who was present in class, who knew the subject and who knew how to teach, you'd be one of the lucky 0.5% of children.
Yeah.
So the challenge of upskilling existing teachers and providing more teachers is a global challenge, and it's huge. And UNESCO estimates that by the end of the next decade, by 2030, the world needs another 69 million teachers to provide education for all.
Wow. That's a vast, vast challenge. We've got some images, one from a primary school in Kenya. So let's take a look at that. Tom, what did you want to say about the image?
Oh, I think this was you, Chris, wasn't it?
Okay, well, this image is part of the TESA project. Now, the TESA project is a project which brings open educational resources, resources which are free, they can be copied, they can be adapted, they can be changed, republished, they can even be sold actually. We have a very liberal licence on them. And we spend, this is an example of the TESA materials. They are, there's 15 books like this. They're educative materials. They're designed to help teachers in their classroom. So they don't have to go away from school, they don't have to go away from the students. They learn on the job. And we did some work with that school in Kenya. We introduced them to these materials and we mediated them. And that's what we spend the grant money doing. We tend to mediate, we produce these resources in collaboration with our African partners, and then we spend the money that we raise in grants in mediating the resources in different ways.
Now, TESSA's been around for a long time. We have all these acronyms and things, but it's one of the projects that you're involved with, and it started in 2005. And you use the word "we collaborate." Now, that can mean many, many different things. How does that work in operation, then, this collaboration in terms of developing materials?
Well, the TESSA materials were produced by a consortium. Professor Bob Moon, who started the project, brought together people from 14 different institutions, higher education institutions, all involved in teacher education across Africa. And over a period of 3 years, this group put together what's now we call the TESSA Library. Each of these materials contains activities, case studies, for teachers to try in their classrooms, and all the ideas for those activities came from our African colleagues, so they reflect the contexts in which they're going to be used.
Excellent. Now, there are lots and lots of different languages, and this has been a challenge in terms of how you've, I guess, reconstructed some of the materials.
It is. Well, the materials were originally put together in English, but they've now been translated into Swahili and Arabic and French. I think Portuguese is the only official African language that they're not available in. And
you use a range of material, don't you, as well? So you've got the books here as well, but you use other media to convey some of the learning material. In the most recent grant, we've developed a MOOC for teacher educators as a way of mediating these materials, and we've had 4,500 people across Africa have registered for the MOOC and taken part in that learning, which has been a very exciting development. Okay, I'm hoping we've got a picture of some of the TESSA MOOC participants as well, so let's see if we can find that to show you at home. Here we go. So these are some people learning with technology, and you've got a phone that's very, very similar to this. So I'm suspecting that those people maybe aren't the MOOC people. They might be doing it in another way, because they've got a far older phone. Now, you've got a phone, and this is actually something that you're using on a different project, the EIA project.
Yes, English in Action in Bangladesh. And here we get teachers to use their own phones, which might be a very simple feature phone like this. And we preload on SD cards videos of teaching practices, new ways of teaching, and also audios for teachers to play in the classroom with their students. And if you think about how you might learn to be a different kind of teacher, you'd want to see something. And when you talk to teachers, they say, yes, I want to see Mrs. So-and-so, and that really helped me. And so by capturing this on the phones, we can actually give those to thousands and thousands of teachers in Bangladesh and elsewhere, so they see something new. And how do you speak a language if you've never heard it? And in Bangladesh, there's very little English spoken. So the idea was to have audios in the classrooms so teachers could hear that, students can hear that, and that really gives us a tool for everybody to learn.
So English in Action is a huge project as well, because we've mentioned this whole idea of scale as well. This is quite a big one, isn't it, in terms of the number of people that you're aiming to reach out to?
Yes. So there's over 50,000 teachers taking part across all districts in Bangladesh. And between them so far, they have been teaching over 7 million children. So it's a big reach.
Phenomenal. And again, one different example of using technology. One of the things the Open University do so incredibly well is make the best use of technology in whatever situation. And here we can see some very diverse ways of actually sort of using these appropriately to branch out to various places. We were speaking before about this idea of scale, Tom, as well. And using technology at scale, and the extent to which, so many, well, I guess the idea is just to get this out to as many people as possible within those contexts.
Yeah, and I think we've used a number of different strategies for that across our development projects. So as Chris was saying, we've got the Box and the MOOCs, the Badged Open courses, and massive open online courses that are accessible to anyone who's got an internet connection, and teachers access those kind of resources in a wide variety of settings. But then we also try and use, not relying on computers or laptops and things like that, but the kind of ubiquitous technologies, low-cost phones. Increasingly, teachers in Africa and Asia have got kind of low-cost smartphones as well now. So we're really trying to make use of the technology that people have rather than projects that require a big investment in new technology that is unfamiliar and unsustainable.
And it's a sustainability as well that's really important, isn't it, in terms of how to get something that's both accessible and taken up by the specific country as well.
Yeah. So in the example that Claire gave in EIA, that was a project over a decade. And when we first began, there was very little technology available to teachers, so we had to provide that. So the unit cost was hundreds of pounds per teacher because we had to give them the technology.
Yeah.
As people increasingly owned their own technology and we adapted the approach we'd got to fit what they'd got, the unit cost for training the teacher came down to a couple of pounds per teacher. So you know, it's much more sustainable if you can use the technology that people have got.
And I think there's different aspects of sustainability, and the teachers that we work with go through programmes that are 12 months, 18 months. So actually there's support throughout that journey. And so there's that sustainability that we get teachers working with other teachers in their school. And so you have that sustainability in that school with those people. But we also bring in sort of district officials from the government who are working with teachers as part of their normal role, and actually encourage them to support those teachers in different ways. So we're really sort of building it from the classroom, from the school, and then people surrounding, supporting them. And that feels, you know, a lot more sustainable, a lot more local.
I think, can I just add to what Claire was saying around sustainability? Because I mean, one of the fact that all our resources are open makes a massive difference in that respect. There's an awful lot of projects that when the project finishes, then the resources disappear. But because our resources are hosted on the Open University website, then they're not ever going to disappear. So provided we've built the capacity of the lead educators in the countries that we're working in, then there's much more chance of being sustainable.
Let's talk about TESS India, because this is something that came out of TESA, so a slightly different project. So if you could fill us in on what this particular project is about.
Well, TESS India had a lot of the same ideas as TESA. It was about providing open resources, this is an example, developed collaboratively in India with Indians. These resources are for teachers in primary and secondary in English, maths and science. And we worked with the Indian government in order to make sure that we were addressing the key aspects of their own national curriculum frameworks. And it was actually, so we got we took what we'd learnt in TESA and we took that to India. And then we started obviously to learn different things, and that was where we got the idea for MOOCs. So we ran the TESS India MOOC, which we actually translated into Hindi as well, and we actually had 50,000 teachers do that one. And it was partly what we'd learnt from that to then develop the TESA MOOC. So there's a lot of, we're continually sort of reviewing, evaluating, learning from each other in the different projects that we do. So TESS India is still going forward. We're working in 7 states, and we've got an in-country partner now, Saves Children. And again, we're looking for more resources in order to encourage the teacher educators and the teachers to use the open educational resources which are available on the internet.
Perfect. We're going to take a quick trip to see what is happening at home with everybody. HJ and Suzanne, how's everyone at home?
We're all good. We're very intrigued by the session, especially thinking about what we can do with our degrees and how we could go forward, make a difference, and what, because a lot of people want to make a difference and are determined to go into primary education or put something forward to make a difference in children's lives, which is why we're really interested. What we're also curious about is we've been thinking how challenging it would be in countries with lots of official languages to actually teach there to start with. And Davin said he thinks that part of the challenge in some countries is convincing the parents the benefits of education for their children as well. So great thoughts in the chat.
Thank you.
There
Chris?
was one thing I was going to pick up from what you just said, is the school that you had a picture of that is called Egerton Primary School.
Egerton Primary School, that's our first image. Let's see if we can get that for you.
It was the one that you showed before.
Yeah.
But that school has got a link with Egerton Primary School in Knutsford.
Okay.
And the first thing that you see when you go into the entrance hall in
Here we
Egerton Primary School is a lot of photographs of Egerton Primary School in Knutsford, and the two schools have visited each other and learned from each other. So for students who are studying primary education, there are a lot of primary schools in this country who do try and forge links with schools across the developing world, and that's something that people might want to look out for.
Yeah. Perfect. Is there anything else you wanted to add about TESA or TES India?
Well, there was one thing I would just say is that the TESA project, because there was a question about Zambia.
Yeah.
And the reason we put that in is that we've just secured some new funding from the Scottish Government to develop TESA in Zambia. And what we're doing there is that we're tapping into existing systems. In Zambia, they have a system of regular teacher group meetings where all teachers are expected to meet on a fortnightly or 3-weekly basis to discuss teaching and learning. And part of the problem with the system is that it lacks resources. So we've been working with the Ministry of Education to put resources into that system. So we have this handbook, and then we also have the TESA materials that have been linked to the Zambian curriculum. And if you want the answer to the question about the languages, there's about 11 languages, official languages in Zambia.
Wow.
And children learn to read in their mother tongue, and which means that they for the first 3 years of primary school. So they're taught in Chitonga, is in the district that we're working in. But even so, in the classroom, there will be children speaking at least 2 other languages, which is a real challenge for the teacher.
Let's see if viewers at home have guessed that there are 11 languages. Yes, they did, very quickly. And we've also given them the answer to the number of teachers required. But we haven't told you whether the number of children reading to write is going up, down or staying the same. So vote on that. Now, the project in Zambia, I wonder if we can talk about that. This is the ZEST project, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's this one, yeah.
Yeah. It's similar to another project in Zimbabwe, isn't it, Tom?
Yes, so we've got a project called IGATE in Zimbabwe, and you were talking about the number of children unable to read or write, and the IGATE project in Zimbabwe is addressing that problem in rural schools. We're working with about 250 primary schools and 50 secondary schools, and the focus there is on foundation literacy and foundation numeracy. What we found is the majority of the children in those schools, our research evidence suggests, you don't have mastery of those skills even at the end of primary school. We were quite surprised when we looked at the teaching and learning that was going on. Often teachers seemed fairly competent, and the general teaching skills seemed quite good, so you're kind of trying to make sense of what was going on there. But it seems that it was very specifically, how do you teach basic literacy, how do you teach basic numeracy, that the teachers just weren't aware of that. So we're trying to provide resources very similar to the ones that Chris has been showing you to help with those skills.
Let's take a look at IGATE. So here we can see this is the school, Tom.
This is one of our schools. This is Kemi Primary School. Kemi Primary School, I visited it about a month ago. It was about 160 kilometres of dirt road driving from the nearest piece of tarmac. It took us about 4 hours to get there.
Wow.
And when we got there, it's a very remote school. They don't have electricity, they don't have mobile phone signals. It's very cut off. And there is a wonderful head teacher at Kemi Primary School who's been working there for a little bit over a year. She is passionately committed to improving literacy, that she wants every child in her school to be able to read and write. And quite independently, she's produced reading resources for every child in the school. She set up phonics practices at the start of every day. She's kind of reads each individual child's written work at the beginning of every week. And the exam results that she's had, the school was getting 13% in the national assessments the year before she arrived. They're getting 53% in the national assessment the year after she arrived. But she felt incredibly isolated and was saying, I'm going to have to leave, I can't cope with living here. And what we've been able to do is to draw her and about half a dozen other excellent head teachers that we've found in the last month together, and set them up as pathfinders so that they are kind of like a leadership group for all of the 250 schools that we're working with, and to share expertise and develop ideas about how they can help other head teachers see similar improvement in their school. So that thing of it's not about kind of imposing solutions from outside, but actually working with people to identify the challenges, identify the scope for improvement, and then really kind of share good practice between people is very important to what we do.
It's interesting because what you're really talking about here is I guess, empowering somebody to have that agency,
Yes.
to be able to go and do things. It's not just, the resources are very, very important as well, but it's more to it than that. It's actually, you know, enabling people to go and take those resources and build confidence and use them in a way that when you are isolated, I can imagine is very, very challenging.
Yeah, and we support the Doing Development Differently manifesto, and part of the agenda with that is about engaging everyone who's got a stake in the change. So as you were saying earlier, it's not just about the teachers and the head teachers, it's also the parents and the children and the wider community. And then it's about legitimising those processes at every level. So you don't just kind of work with the Ministry of Education or just work with the schools, but you work with every layer of the education system in between, and get all of those people together to identify the issues and ways forward with addressing them. So everyone's got a stake in it and everyone's voice is heard. And that kind of participatory process is really important to the work that we do.
So you're all doing amazing work on these various projects, but in addition to that, you're using that work to deliver degrees for students and actually, you know, embed quite a lot of what you're taking into teaching here. So could I just ask you to finally sort of say something about that aspect, about how you're delivering degrees for students?
Do you want to go first, Chris?
Well, I'm work in the faculty in Wales. I'm a senior lecturer in teacher education, and I work on the postgraduate master's courses. So literally half my time, that's what I'm doing. I'm working. We're in production at the moment, so I've been looking at audio-visual today, ready to put in our new module E831. But then the other half of my time, I'm working on these projects. So 2 weeks ago, I was in a school in rural Zambia, working with a teacher who had walked 15 kilometres in order to get there. So it's quite a contrast. We do manage to use a lot of what we learn in the courses. On E309, the reader has got, I think it's got 19 chapters altogether, many of which have been written by me and my colleagues, bringing what we've learned in our international work directly into the degree work. And likewise in the masters, E830 and E831 are both courses which will incorporate quite a bit of what we've learned.
Tom, you're involved in getting a lot of funding for projects.
Yeah.
Successfully.
So to keep all of this work going, it is always a hunt for funding, because programmes are usually, EIA was very unusual. That was a 10-year project, but it was in three-year phases, and most projects are funded anything between kind of 1 to 3 years. So you're always in a process of bidding for new work and new opportunities to extend the kind of range of what we do.
And Claire, then with you.
Yeah, so I work in the International Development Office, and so we bring together professionals from the development sector with academics to create these projects and these ideas. And we also very much actually feed that back into the OU, into different modules, into different technologies they're using, so that actually we can mutually benefit and learn from each other.
Thank you very much. Well, we're going to end with a video to show everybody at home a little bit more about the EIA project.
Cool, thank you.
So enjoy that video, and then we'll be back to take a look at how the library can support you in your studies in 5 minutes. We'll see you then.